to be able to study this book, we will have to use Hebrew. So I suppose not everyone here knows the Hebrew language. Wait, what does Linda say to us? To turn on my camera, please forgive me. No problem, no problem. We completely forgive you. So where were we? Yes, that. So to understand the book of Bereshit, it will be Genesis, as we say in French, it will be necessary to use the Hebrew version. So I know well that not everyone here knows Hebrew, and so we will translate. But it will be useful to follow the Hebrew text for those who have it. And if only for the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, which is translated as in the beginning. There is in the Zohar, the book of Jewish mysticism, a section called the Tikkun Zohar with 70 different interpretations. That is to say, 70 chapters. Each chapter being a different interpretation of the word Bereshit. And so if we really wanted to cover the question, then it would take at least 70 lessons just to understand the first word. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that the Mishnah tells us, the oral tradition tells us, that it is forbidden to teach the secrets of Bereshit in public. And so what we are going to do, we are going to be superficial. It is still part of the Torah. It is written in the Torah, so it has meaning. And so we will try to have depth in our superficiality. First of all, let's quickly recall how the Torah begins. It begins with, I will translate with the usual translation to be quicker. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. It was darkness over the face of the abyss. A divine breath hovered above the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. If I try to compare this teaching of the Torah, well, what the Torah tells us, with mythological tradition. In mythologies, remember that the mythological literature contemporary to the time of the Torah's revelation, that is, what the nations were saying about the origin of the world, is in opposition or rivalry with the account given by the Torah. Now, to take, for example, Greek mythology, which I assume is known by the majority, the Greeks admitted the existence of a multitude of gods. There is a god of love, Aphrodite. There is a god of war, Ares, etc., etc. There are many gods, and above the gods, there are the great gods. The greatest among them considered the god of thunder, Zeus. But again, according to Greek traditions themselves, Zeus is not the first of the gods. He is the son of Cronus. And Cronus himself is the son of Uranus and Gaia. Uranus means the sky, Gaia, the earth. And who are Uranus and Gaia descended from? They are descended from chaos. Chaos, as they say in Greek. They are descended from chaos. Now, chaos is not even a deity. Chaos is a kind of original disorder, a sort of primordial nebula. And from this primordial nebula, a world was formed. First gods, and then after, nature and material life, and finally, human beings. But that means that the Greeks, if they read the Torah, would have started with the second verse. The earth was disorder and desolation, chaos. And that poses a problem. If at the origin of the world, there is chaos, there is disorder, it means that order is not primordial. And so, even if we manage to bring some order to the world, ultimately it will lead to disorder, because everything returns to its origin. So you have disorder, then order, and finally disorder. This is somewhat what underlies, for example, the law of thermodynamics, what we call entropy. That is to say, the world is decomposing, losing its form. And on the other hand, what the Torah says is that before chaos, there was a beginning, there is an origin. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which means that before disorder, there is a thought, a will, which makes chaos and disorder temporary. There will come a time when finally everything will return to order. So if we consider the three phases, if everything returns to its origin, it starts with order, continues with disorder, but then order is restored. That is to say, this vision is fundamentally optimistic, whereas mythological thought is pessimistic, considering that ultimately what prevails in the world is death. On the other hand, in an optimistic thought, that of the Torah, what ultimately prevails in the world is life. And why? Because there was an origin, there was a thought. And the word in the beginning is said in Hebrew as Bereshit. Refer to the verse in the book of Proverbs, Magid Mereshit. No, in the book of Isaiah, sorry. Magid Mereshit Aharit. If there is a beginning, it means there is an end. From the start, there is an end. And so, the book we read is necessarily an optimistic book, Bereshit, Bara Elohim. Let's delve a little deeper into the subject. The word Bereshit, which I initially translated as in the beginning, God created. In fact, that's not what it means in Hebrew. In Hebrew, Bereshit means in the beginning of, and not simply in the beginning. So the problem is, if Bereshit means in the beginning of, the question immediately arises, in the beginning of what? And that the Torah does not say. So it means we have mistranslated the word Bereshit. It should be understood in another sense, as a kind of allegory. It is in favor of the Reshit, because the letter Bet, which begins the word Bereshit, can mean for the sake of. So Bereshit means for the sake of Reshit, in consideration of the Reshit, that God created the heavens and the earth. Interesting. Who is this Reshit for whom the world was created? There you have at least 7 different interpretations in the teachings of the sages. And so for now we are exempt from knowing which Reshit is in question. But it means something very important. It is that the Torah does not fulfill the function of science. Science tells us how the world works. How did the world come into being? For example, today, the most prominent theory, the most, let's say, fashionable theory, like the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang means that there would be a sort of explosion at the origin of all beings, while all matter was gathered in a singular point. And ultimately, it is from this explosion, this Big Bang, that matter was finally formed. And from matter, ultimately the solar system. The solar system, they led to evolution. Evolution reached up to human. Well, all of that, if you will, is the work of scientists to discuss. The Torah never says how the world, in what order the world appeared, and how long it took. It tells us why the world was created and not that the world was created. The reader is supposed to know from the start that the world was created. What he does not know, and this is what the Torah comes to explain to him. For what purpose? Why was it created? That is to say, the world of meaning, which means from the outset that all attempts to say that the Torah and science are in opposition, or that the Torah and science are in agreement. These statements make no sense because the Torah and science do not talk about the same thing. Science will tell us the what, and the Torah will tell us the why. And so all the questions we might have about divergences between science and the Torah are actually irrelevant, given that the Torah comes to tell us the why. And all the why is what we will study in the first parasha, in the first section of Bereshit. Let's move on to another important point. In the beginning, God created. At the beginning of them, so for the Reshit, Bara Elohim, God created. The term creation also needs to be explained a bit, because we are used to saying what is created. It is ex nihilo, as we say in Latin, from nothingness. The problem is that none of us here has ever experienced something that is created from nothingness. So we cannot really understand what that means. But we can understand what it might mean for us. And here I will have to refer to another language, not Hebrew, but the language that is the subconscious of Hebrew. The language that is the subconscious of Hebrew, as we will prove later, is Aramaic. Now the word bara, which means he created, in Hebrew, in Aramaic, it means he evacuated. By the way, those who know Arabic here, when you say to someone bara, it means get out, go away. And bara in Aramaic is similar. It means to be put outside. In French as well, you have the verb exister, which has the etymology exist, to be outside. This means that creation, from the perspective of biblical language, is to be put outside. What does it mean to be put outside? It means that I am cast out of divinity. That is what it means to be creation. Now, if someone throws me out, if I feel like I've been put outside, generally, what this will do to me is that I will have the desire to go back in. That is to say, this movement, which is called in Hebrew teshuvah, the desire to return to the origin, let's say, is intrinsic to creation itself. As soon as I know that I am a creature, I want to return to my origin. This is what explains mystical movements, the tendency that beings sometimes have to want to return to the original being. In psychoanalysis, it is about returning to the mother's womb. But more broadly, it means I want to return to my origin. So you see that already. In the first two words of the Torah, there is a gigantic universe. I promise you that in the continuation of our study, we will not delve into such precision for each word. A small additional remark. The name of God in the first verse is Ba Elohim. Elohim thus designates the one who is the creator of the world, but who creates it according to the laws of nature. So every time we find the word Elohim in the Torah, it represents the divinity, as the organizer of the laws of nature. There are other terms to represent the divinity, the tetragrammaton. And that is something entirely different. It is the God of morality. A little revelation is the same one. The God of nature and the God of morality are indeed the same. But these are different aspects of his activity that we designate with these terms. There is a great richness in the use of the names of God in the Jewish tradition. So I was at the third word for now. Bereshit, bara, Elohim. At the beginning of everything, Elohim put outside, bara, put outside. Now, what did the good Lord create? We say, in the beginning, God created. What did he create? The innate spontaneous answer is He created the world. Look closely in the Torah. You will see that the word world does not exist. It is a Greek term, cosmos. It means that the entirety of beings is a single unit. In the Torah, you consistently find that God created two things, the heavens and the earth. The world, that originates from a single God, is characterized by duality. There is the heavens and there is the earth. So these are two entirely different entities. The heavens, if you will, is the world of values, the absolute world. The earth is the place where values are fulfilled. It is the place of work. For now, I have been very generous with you. I was very quick on the first verse. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashama v'ha'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But it's already an entire plan. If you move on to the second verse, if you look in the text, you will see that the second verse begins with the words, and the earth was. Oh, really? And what about the sky then? That means for now we will focus on the earth, and the sky we will talk about it much later. When are we going to talk about the sky? For that, we need to reach the second book of the Torah in Exodus, where God reveals himself from the sky. I am grateful to you, I am yours. It is from the sky that I have spoken with you. Which means that to understand what happens in the sky, one must go through the entire story until the moment of revelation. And for now, it takes place here on the earth. Check it. Vea aretza eta, and the earth was. So this is the beginning. I hope I haven't been too complicated. And now we will continue. The first verse of the Torah gives me a very good impression. When I read in the Torah, at the beginning God created the sky and the earth, there is a beautiful expression in French. Everything the old man does is well done. Besides, I tell myself that if it is God who created the world, then it is an ideal world. It is the best of all possible worlds. At least that is the feeling I get from reading the first verse. And then suddenly I see in the second verse the absolute opposite. The earth was desolation, chaos. There was darkness over the abyss. A divine breath hovered over the waters, meaning the terrible chaos. So there is a contradiction between the first verse and the second. The first verse, to use philosophical terms, speaks of how things are in truth. And the second tells us how things are in the reality. In absolute truth, everything is going very well. In reality, many things are going wrong. I wouldn't say everything's going wrong, but many things are going wrong. And so it is this tension that the Torah will highlight. There is order, and then afterwards there is disorder. And what happens after the disorder? From that there is the third verse. And the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, up to the 31st. And what does it talk about? Of a progressive ordering. Then God said, let there be light, and then let dry land appear, and let there be plants, and lights, fish, birds, beasts, and man. Let's imagine ourselves a bit like someone who enters a place where there is a terrible mess. He says, well, there is a mess here. First, let's turn on the light to see what's going on. And then after turning on the light, he says, it's wet here. So he drains the water so that the dry ground appears. And then he says, if there is already that, then let's put some green plants to decorate. And if we already put green plants, then let's put some lights on the ceiling, the fixtures, to illuminate permanently. And if there are already fixtures, then let's put a bird cage and an aquarium with fish and birds. And then let's put an armchair in the house, and we will finally be able to welcome the inhabitant, the man. This is what the story of the first chapter looks like. If we think about it, the first verse talks to us about order, about a perfect world. The second verse talks to us about the disorder of an imperfect world, and from the third verse to the end of the chapter, a world in the process of perfecting itself, a world evolving towards good. It's a bit like what happens when you give a good grade on a test. You know that when the student's answer is correct, we put a little check mark next to their answer. If you look closely at a small check mark, there is a line that goes from top to bottom, and from the bottom it rises infinitely upwards. That's the return, the teshuvah. That is to say, a world that has an ideal but cannot be realized immediately becomes a disorder, and this disorder must eventually become a world that is constantly perfecting itself. This is the third part of the creation of the world. All of this is very beautiful. This means that, in fact, the world is optimistic. There is a permanent optimism that makes us know that creation, with all the disorder it involves, will ultimately end well. Is the optimism that the Torah speaks of a naive optimism? No. The Torah tells us we know that the world is going badly, but if it is going badly, it is because it will eventually go well. It is impossible for there to be a creator who has a plan for his creation and who would allow it to go so badly. So if it is going badly, it is temporary. That is the primary message of the Torah. But we know that it involves catastrophes, it involves falls and disorders. This is therefore the first part of the study of Bereshit. Let's continue. Let's continue unless there are questions. But if there are no questions, I will continue. There is essentially, in the appearance of beings, there are, in essence, let us, if we may, dare to say, 4 distinct phases. I will take here as an example the first, what the Torah calls the first day. Remember that this has nothing to do with time. It's a world of values. On the first day, you have a short phrase, let there be light. It's a project. Second phrase. And there was light. It's an accomplishment. Third phrase, and God saw that the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. This phrase, is a judgment. A judgment with the consequences of the judgment. The light is good. Therefore, it must be separated from the darkness. Fourth phase, it was evening, it was morning. A single day. So let me recap. In practically each of the days of creation, there are 4 layers. There is the project, there is the accomplishment, there is the judgment, and there is the recapitulation. For example, on the second day, there is a firmament. So it's a project. And then when God makes the firmament, it's the accomplishment. Interestingly, on the second day, it is not said that God saw that it was good, but there is still the recapitulation. It was evening, it was morning, the second day. On the third day, you again have a project accomplishment. and judgment twice. It is said twice that God saw that it was good. This was to complete what was not done on the second day. And finally, recapitulation. It was evening, it was morning, the third day, etc. I would like to pause with you on the fourth phase now to analyze the fourth phase. So the fourth phase, you remember that on the first day it is said, it was evening, it was morning, a single day. At the end of the second day, the Torah says, and it was evening and it was morning, the second day. At the end of the third, it was evening, it was morning, the third day. At the end of the fourth, don't worry, you won't get bored. At the end of the fourth, the Torah says, it was evening, it was morning, the fourth day. At the end of the fifth, the Torah says, it was evening, it was morning, the fifth day. At the end of the sixth, there is a slight difference. It was evening, it was morning, the sixth day. The Torah adds a definite article. It was the sixth day. What does this definite article mean? We might talk about it later. And then comes the seventh day. Seventh day, it's in the second chapter. For the hand chopping, you need to stop this neck. It's Vamda. Heaven and the earth were completed with all they contain. And on the seventh day, Elohim finished the work which he had done and completely and utterly completed it. He finally ceased on the seventh day all the work he had done. And go Louis Weather, my dear. Elohim blessed the seventh day. He sanctified it because 40. On this day he had ceased all his work that God had created to do. It was evening. It was morning, seventh day. So then I have recalled here a little longer. What does the Torah say about the seventh day? And I simply lied. I told you that there's a verse that does not exist. I told you it was evening, it was morning, seventh day. This verse that one would naturally expect does not exist.